So would you say that the cornerstone of what you're saying is learn how to feel your emotions and then feel them in simple terms, really? So maybe for me to go back to basics about what you're saying.
That's a part of what we're saying.
Well, it's not the cornerstone of what I'm saying. The cornerstone of what I'm saying is have a relationship with God, and that the God stuff. So a lot of people start believing that divine truth is like a self-help program. It's not a self-help program. It's a relationship with God program. Now, a relationship with God will solve many of your problems, because as you develop the relationship with God, you will work through many things, including developing those qualities. Those qualities will almost be natural to develop as you develop your relationship with God. This is why we encourage people to receive love from God and progress that way. But the problem for most people is they don't even know what love really is or feels like, and they don't even really know how to experience their own feelings, even how to actually have a feeling for God, how to have a longing for God, how to have a desire. Most people have become so detuned through their childhood, but by the time they're in their teens and their 20s, all they're doing is acting on addiction rather than desire. So everything becomes, you give me this, I give you that, everything's fine, and we're all happy. And obviously we're not all happy, but we're doing the best we can is the general thought. But what Mary and I are trying to teach, firstly, is that a relationship with God does solve all of these problems, but in order to have a relationship with God, you've got to be able to connect emotionally. Now, what you just said about your emotions is very true. You do need to soften to what your emotions are and start recognizing them, but more importantly, you need to experience them. Because when you experience them, if they are a negative emotion, they will be relieved. In other words, they'll leave you. So if you think of your soul, so here's your half of the soul, full of emotion of different types, but mostly all denied, mostly all suppressed. So when you start feeling an emotion that's out of harmony with love, your soul is constructed in a way that that emotion will leave you and it won't ever return unless you invite it. Right? Remember, as a child, you didn't invite it, but it was sort of forced upon you. But now as an adult, once you have an emotion leave you, it can only return if you invite it in. All right? So let's say the emotion is, as we were talking just earlier, fear, terror, and grief about how your father treated you. Let's say it's that. All right? Once you fully feel that emotion, and by the way, that emotion will be experienced at the age that it occurred. So you're going to feel quite nuts feeling it, because you're going to go from being, how old are you now? 50 to being 4 when you're feeling it, or 3 when you're feeling it, right? So you're going to feel, it's going to be like quite a psychologically challenging thing to do to release it. But once it's gone, it's gone. And it won't ever return unless you invite it in, and you'd never choose to invite it in again, would you? So why would it ever return?
You know, I think my sense of the work that I have been doing is that I'm playing around on the surface in some way.
Yeah.
So I feel,
I agree.
and I think that I'm feeling my emotions, but am I really getting to the causal root of them?
No.
So that is, in response to just what you put on the board then, is like getting to the root, how to really feel, how to get to the root of that.
Yeah, that takes time to develop that skill, actually.
Yeah, it's not something you just decide to do and whammo, you do it. You have. There's a lot of reasons why you shut down in your childhood experience, and this gets back to some of the things we were talking to Marie about you have beliefs about what's going to happen if you feel your emotions freely. You have corrupt faith. You think, oh, everyone will think I'm nuts. What if it never ends?
What
How am I going to cope with
and I
it?
feel like I'm 4 for the rest of my life?
Yeah,
that's going to be bad.
And it just feels like it was so bad, and I won't even survive it. A lot of these beliefs we have are actually emotions as well that we need to release. or we feel like being the way I am now, stoic and like kind of man of the world, that's protected me. That's what I took on to protect this little person or these experiences inside of me. And so it's a process of deconstructing all of those things that is going to enable you to feel more and more, and eventually you'll release.
Well, that's half of it, isn't it?
Yeah, because you've got to. Yeah, you go. Other half. Tag.
Well, the half of it is what Mary's saying, that you've got to get rid of the pain. You've got to get rid of the pain from your history, and the only way you can.
You mean feel it?
Yeah, yeah. That's the only way you can get rid of it, is to experience it fully at the age it happened.
Which you think, if you think about yourself as a God-created being, and I know some of you are not there yet, that there is a God who created you, but if you think about a loving parent, they would want you to feel capable to experience yourself and to know your life, and to know that you're created with the strength to release pain and experience immense joy. That's how God created us, and to engage your will to face challenges and pain, but also to seek love and truth and faith, and to experience the benefits of those things. A loving parent wants you to do that. So when a lot of people come to say, well, I've got all this suppressed pain, why on earth should I have to do it? Well, a loving parent would want you to be able to do that. Yeah.
And be able and get you to the stage where you can cope with anything.
Yeah.
So can I ask?
So that's step 1 to 1. Remember, we haven't gone to 2.
We've got to go tag to 2.
Ask whatever you want to.
So, like, is it good to understand what my limitations are in feeling these feelings, these emotions truly, and what pointers would you give to really feel? Like, in your experiences, how did you guys feel ultimately those deep grief, that sadness? How did you guys do it?
Well, I'm still in the process of doing it.
The biggest quality you're going to need to develop is compassion for self. Most of the time we were taught in our childhood to not have compassion for self, to not have compassion for your own feelings, to not even recognise them where possible. You're going to have to learn and develop compassion for self. You're going to have to get to the stage where you go, I know I've got stuff within me, and I'm not going to be able to access it even unless I have some of this love of self, compassion for self, compassion for my circumstance and situation. I'm also going to, so you could rename that love of self, couldn't you? Because that's what compassion is, an aspect of love. So you're going to have some love of self. You're going to also have to have some love of truth. Because a lot of, in your childhood, there's a lot of lies that have been presented to you about why your parents did things, you know, and why the society did things. And those things caused damage to you, but you were also lied about it. So many of you now believe the lie. You will even regurgitate the lie. You know, like, when I say that, what I mean is that when somebody says to you, oh, this happened to you in your childhood and that was really bad, you go, no, it wasn't. It happens to everybody. There's
they meant
a lie.
well. They meant well, or
they meant well. No, they didn't. That's a lie. You know, it's not. You might say, and this might be the more accurate statement, they didn't know what they were doing, which is probably more truthful. You know, hardly any parent comes with a manual to know what they're doing, right? So you know, they probably didn't know what they were doing. But surely, if they were sensitive enough, they knew they were hurting you. So obviously, they were desensitized by the time they had children, which is a problem. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had your problems, right? But if you have compassion and love for self, you will go, I'm not going to stoically and angrily push myself into feeling something, because that is not going to ever work. It's never going to, you're never going to access the emotion if you do that. Also, there's no magical solution. You know, you can't just lay on a bed and get a bit of massage and a bit of tickle here and you know, like, and all of a sudden, all of your causal emotions in your childhood are going to pop out all of a sudden, because you're going to have to develop a level of desire for them to come in order for them to come. You know, because if you think about your soul, in your soul, you've got suppressed emotion. So I'm drawing half, right? Because you're a half. You've got suppressed emotion. It's suppressed because you don't want to feel it.
Your will is engaged.
Your will is saying, I don't want to feel it.
It's interesting because I would say that my desire to feel is definitely there.
I disagree.
Okay. I say that because I feel the implications of them. You know, I suffer from
I
that.
agree with that statement.
Yeah.
That statement is true.
And that motivates me to process, to feel.
I disagree.
Tell me.
Well, the second statement you said is actually true. You do have a motivation to deal with some things. So I'm not criticising your motivation here. What I'm saying is you've got some fears inside of you about how to go about doing it. And those fears create a lack of motivation to do it. Fear is like a wall. So you say these hard emotions are behind the wall. And at the moment, it's like there's a wall there to the real hard emotions. So when you start feeling at the moment, you're feeling some surface layer stuff. You know, it's like sensing the emotion through the wall. But you're not actually deconstructing the wall. The wall being a wall of fear and terror about the emotion.
And what it's going to be like to be in this space.
And what it's going to mean for your future if you deal with it. And what changes might happen to your life if you deal with it. And what corrupt faith you have about dealing with it. And what damages there might be to your current life by dealing with it. And what changes you might have to make by dealing with it. And there's all these fears that get constructed over the course of our life about the actual feelings. So when you said, I feel like I need to deal with it, I agree with you. I can feel in you, you definitely feel like you need to deal with it. You feel also intellectually like you'd like to deal with it because you can see the problems of not dealing with it, right? You're aware of some of the problems of not dealing with this emotion. So I also agree with that statement. But when you say, I really feel like I want to deal with it, I can't agree because when you really feel like you want to deal with it, you will have had to have deconstructed this fear. You would have had to have gone through the terror. And that's what most people don't want to do. We talked about this in 2016. We did a group called Understanding Your Loving Self or something like that.
Understanding My Loving Self.
Yep. And in there we talked about this global fear that most people have about the emotions. And until you penetrate that wall of fear, until you actually, and to penetrate it, you have to feel the terror. So what a lot of people are trying to do is to like somehow scale the wall of terror and go down the other side and then feel their emotion.
So it's like, it's feeling the fear of feeling the strong, deep grief, deep fear again.
Yeah. Exactly that.
And a lot of times, so we construct sort of this entity that interacts with the world. And when you come up to this...
Can we call it fake me?
Fake me, facade me, got it all together me, you know, the one who's in control and all of that.
Control me.
Yeah. When you come up to this wall and you consider what's on the other side, part of what you're grappling with is, I'm going to have to give up this entity that interfaces with the world, how I'd like to perceive myself to be, to discover what's really underneath, you know, what I'm really harbouring. Because it's not just the way I've been harmed, it's the way I'm harming others, and there's a lot of things in there.
There's a lot of sin in it too, like of things that I've actually done to harm others.
That I'm going to feel about.
And people are far more afraid of dealing with that than they're afraid of dealing with anything else, to be honest.
Yeah. So in my experience, a lot of it's been deconstructing even the person that I'd like to think I am. You know, I had a lot of fear about that, to coming to who I really am, you know, what's really in me. And what's in us is not who we are either. It's just stuff that's been stored that we can release so that we can become who we really are. We can fully express who we are in a loving sense. But, you know, when we're in this facade-based lifestyle, we're a long way from who God created us to be, and also what we're carrying, what we're storing.
Yeah, maybe that's my sense of it, is that I'm playing around on the surface, so to speak.
Yeah, in front of the wall here. Yeah.
In front of the wall,
In a way that doesn't challenge your current life.
Too much.
Yeah. Just keep it to an hour a week or something.
And to be frank, when you get behind the wall, it's going to blow your whole life away.
Yeah. Which
That
is
happens
good.
to everybody.
So what would you say about that, about, you know, getting through that wall?
Yeah, that as Mary said, one of the very first things that need to happen is, and by the way, we still haven't talked about the second,
Yeah.
have we? But I just want to remind you that we haven't done that. As Mary said first, you need to start deconstructing the fake self, because the fake self is a construction made in order to control the fear that you have to keep everything suppressed behind the wall, right? And that fake self is generally a construction of our own, for the most part. You know, we learnt, usually by sort of mid-childhood, 7 or 8 years of age, we start to realise a fake self is necessary. And so sometimes you see it earlier, but rare. But after 7 years of age, nowadays we're seeing in children of 3 or 4, but because it's so subconsciously done, unconsciously done. But for the most part, most people, by the time they're 7, they start realising a fake self is necessary in order to survive life. And so what they do is they start working on the person they're going to come to be, like the person they're going to try to be. And that self, you end up being very proud of, because that self saved you from all the pain and suffering of the hurt self, the person that was hurt. But the problem with that is it also covers over all the hurt quite effectively. And it also enters addictions quite effectively, right, with other people to cover over the hurt. And so we end up sinning in that fake self quite a lot. We end up doing things to avoid the pain and suffering that we have experienced in childhood. We end up doing a lot of things that act upon that pain and suffering. And honestly, many of you think, oh, I don't have a lot of pain and suffering from my childhood, but from God's perspective, God's standard of love, almost every single person on this planet has a huge amount of problems regarding love. And so this is, from God's perspective, how you've been injured is all about love. How it's been outside of God's standard of love. So from God's perspective, God's standard of love is not being applied on earth, and a lot of the damage you think is normal. Like for many of you, you think, oh, this is normal me. It's not normal you from God's perspective, because it doesn't meet God's standard of love, and also a corrupt standard of love, which we called evil, like if you look
love
at
spelt backwards.
Love spelt backwards, which is really evil, right? So the opposite of love, if you think about it, is really evil, right? Many of us believe evil to be love. That's how bad our definition of love is. We don't realise how bad it is, because we haven't had anybody teach us God's standards our entire life, for the most part. Religions are not capable of teaching you God's standards because they don't have them. And they purport to be the people who know all about God, but they don't know anything of God's standards of love. Most religions teach that God is a punishing, cruel God. So they definitely don't know God at all, right? So they are teaching that this standard of love that they say God has, but actually it's not God's standard at all. It's human standards. And they're basically justifying human standards of love by creating a religion to justify those standards. And the net result is even the people who purport to believe in God are actually teaching you that God is evil. So how are those same religions ever going to teach you what love really is? And so the net result of that on earth is that we have imbibed all of these beliefs. And maybe what we need to do is just have a quick break for you to go to the toilet, and then talk about some of those standards we've imbibed, so that you can sort of understand. So here I'm talking about the theory of it all, right? But we haven't really talked about what it looks like in practice, have we? Like how these things have become switched over in our own belief systems, where what we believe love to be, from God's perspective, is actually quite evil, right? And it's really powerful to understand this switch that has occurred, and then in the process of understanding the switch, we can start deconstructing the problem. Yeah. Right? We have to face the problem before we can deconstruct a problem, right? Scientific method. So we need to define the problem, then we can deconstruct the problem. And the problem is fundamentally that our beliefs of that we think are love, for the most part, are not love at all. They're the opposite of love, which is evil. And this is why we end up with evil en masse. You know, the whole world is in a state, really, isn't it, of evil. We're destroying the environment. We're destroying the very place we live in. We're going to get to a stage in 30 years' time, probably, where the environment's going to be so hot, the majority of us are going to have to move somewhere to cool down. And then on top of that, we're destroying the environment so much that the oxygen production in the environment may be so far affected, because at the moment the main oxygen production is the ocean, you know, with all the seaweed and everything in the ocean. And if we pollute the ocean more than what we're doing, we're going to get to a stage where the ocean will stop producing greenery that sucks all the carbon out of the air and gives us oxygen. And then what are we doing to all the forests? They're all oxygen producers. They're all getting destroyed more and more and more. If we're not careful, we're going to either starve to death, have no clean water to drink, which is going to mean the majority of people fighting wars over water, or we're going to end up with no oxygen if it's extreme. And that's how much evil there is. We're so evil that we're willing to destroy our own home in order to get what we want. Seemingly get what we want. That's how bad it is, right? And yet the majority of us don't see it in practice because we don't yet feel or understand God's standards of love. And this is why most things that are happening on earth at the moment, do you ever see any problem really solved? You know, like, to a large part, the unloving exercise of technology has got us into a situation where we're destroying the planet. And they are telling me that technology is going to be our solution. Now, I'm not convinced, because no one's loving in the way they implement it. Right? Until somebody proves to me they can be loving implementing technology, then I would say unlikely that technology is going to be the solution. Right? The reality is human souls changing is going to be the solution, but it's a hard solution because each of us are going to be required to break through that barrier of fear and get into the real stuff, to stop being fake and stop, and get into the real me. And the real me, which remember is number one, the first half we're still talking about, is getting rid of the pain, the hurt self. Like deconstructing the hurt self by feeling the hurt and taking responsibility for feeling the hurt. We don't have to take responsibility for the hurt unless we personally created it. But we do need to feel the hurt by taking responsibility for it, is feeling it, because it's in us now and nobody else can feel it for us. And we need to go through that process. That's number one.
Can I add, we're just about the fear. Yep. And I think it's going to segue into what you were going to say as number two. Mm-hmm. But for me, deconstructing that facade, that fakeness, that's no joke. Like, that's a big thing you've got to do, actually. Huge. It's a big thing to see yourself really, and see where you're out of harmony with love, and where you're actually seeking to meet an addiction, and where you're actually seeking to present a fakeness to the world. And so that's important work. I think this fear thing, because I know a lot of people get pretty stuck at this fear place, the biggest thing that has helped me begin to move through that space is the aspiration for the other things that Jesus wrote on the board before. A true development of my own desire to grow character in harmony with God, God's morality. So that is the thing that created the incentive. And I didn't have to do magical body work or, really focus on my fear as much. as deconstruct the crap that I was telling myself about myself, be real about the fact that I was terrified, and then aspire to be a loving person, to be truthful always, to consider what can I have faith in that is realistic and good.
And to go through the emotion of terror in order to
yeah,
do that.
That's what helped me to start to go through the emotion of terror. That's what broke it for me, I suppose.
Yeah. So number 2. I'm going to be harping on these things for some time to come, right? Do I want to do a pee break?
Don't you want to
do you want to do a pee break?
Do you want to finish this question
do I
before
want to
we
finish
do
this question
the
first?
standards? Yeah, I think we should.
Let's finish the question first. Right, number 2, important thing. So we've already said, deconstructing the fear, you're going to have to go through the terror to deconstruct the terror. You have to feel it, you have to experience it. Once you deconstruct the terror, you will naturally go into the grief, the grieving person. Now, the grieving person is grieving for 2 reasons. One, things happen to it. Other people, other society, whatever, parents, whatever, did things to it, and it's got grief stored there because it wasn't allowed to feel it at the time. That's number 1. Number 2 is that I did things to myself or to others that guilt is going to have grief associated with it. The guilt of doing the wrong thing is going to have grief associated with it. So there's 2 types of grief I'm going to have to experience, and that grief will be exposed once I deconstruct my terror about the whole thing. Right? That's number 1. That's what we have to do first. The second thing we need to do is we need to learn what is good. You know, we can't just get rid of what is bad, because if you get rid of what is bad and you don't learn about what is good, then you end up with nothing. Don't you? It's sort of like, get rid of everything bad, what's left? I'm a blank slate. And obviously being a blank slate is not going to help you be happy, right? So you're going to have to learn some good things. What are all the good things? Didn't we just list them? Okay, so God's love, firstly, the best thing you could ever have, right? So God's love first. God's love. Next thing, human love. Perfect natural man love, you know, loving others, loving self, all that kind of stuff. Loving soulmate, yeah, human love. Truth. Whose truth? Yeah, God's truth. Now, I've got to bring my truth into harmony with God's truth, because my truth is just crap otherwise. You know, I don't know whether it's truth or lies or whatever, do I? If it's in harmony with God's truth, now I know truth. Only thing that's real in the universe is God's truth, right? Bring myself in harmony with God's truth, which is really the same as saying bring myself in harmony with God's laws, because that's how God establishes truth, through law, right? Then, in order to do that, I'm going to have to be humble. In order to be humble, I'm going to have some faith. In order to do all of that, I'm going to have to take some, not just you know, do all the feeling for 3 years in my bedroom, right, and not live a life. I'm going to have to do all these things while I'm living a life, taking an action in my life. Yeah. Now, if I focus on those things, I am now developing positive qualities, while at the same time, once I've broken through that terror barrier, releasing the unlovingness that's within me. So now my fears are going down, my desires are going up. Now my evil is going down, my sin is going down, my love is going up. My lies are going down, you know, the lies I tell myself, the lies I tell others, they're going down. My desire for truth and my actions in truth, in harmony with truth, are going up. You know, my corrupt faith is going down. My beliefs in what is false is going down. My beliefs in what are true is going to be going up. Now I'm making change. In harmony with God's laws, I'm making change. And as I make change, the changes that will happen in me eventually other people will see them. Also, they'll start asking, you look happier. What's going on? Why do you look happier? What did you do? You know, your relationship's better. Why is that better? What did you do to make your relationship more happy? Because ours is not happy. Huh? They'll start asking questions. This gives you a chance then to share that you did those two things. You deconstructed your fear, you went into your grief, both the guilt-based grief based on the things you did wrong and the grief that was associated with what other people did to you. And then you also, at the same time, began to develop these things which brought your condition of love up and also caused you to do things in harmony with that condition that now caused you to become happy. And people will see it, they will. And the more they see it, the more they'll be interested in doing it. The more they're interested in doing it, you can help them do it. The more you can help them do it, and they do it if they choose to do it, because it has to be for them that they choose to do it. If they do it, then they'll benefit, and then when they benefit, they'll feel the same as you, they'll be happier too, and then other people say, why are you happy? And it's like a snowball then, isn't it? Right? But it's got to start with a few of us following God's way. This is God's way. Right? And in the first century, we didn't call Christianity, right? We called it God's way. The way. It was called the way. Yeah. For this reason, because this is the way. And this is, for those of you who have been Christian in your past, this is what I refer to as the narrow way that leads to life. You know, there's a quote of me saying that in the Bible, and I did actually say it. I didn't say there was a broad way leading to destruction. I said there was a broad way leading to hell, to evil, to pain and suffering. Most people are following the broad way. Very few follow the narrow way, because it is a narrow way. It's like God's way. He made it. You've got to find it and then do it. That's how it works. And you've got to want to do it. You're going to have to want to do it like pretty intensely in order to do it. Given the condition of the world we live in, it's going to have to be an intense desire. But everyone who's ever done it has reaped the benefits of doing it. And the benefits are far more immense than you can imagine. Yeah? So, and we've talked about the benefits to different groups of people, but obviously many of you may not have heard the benefits, but it's something worth studying up on, because that can increase the motivation to go through the terror wall and deconstruct the facade and go through the terror wall and into that grief, and to also start developing these qualities. Yeah. Now we can go to the toilet.
Thank you.
Yeah. No worries.